I'm David Scandura,
I'm Justus Burkett.
and today we're here to find out is the full Monty the greatest movie ever made?
Because you're fat and he's thin, and you're both fucking ugly.
Welcome to the greatest movie ever made, the show where we watch a movie and talk about and find out if it's the greatest movie ever made.
Gentlemen, the lunchbox has landed. I can't always introduce myself in a British accent every single time we watch an English movie. That bit is going to get very old. I've already done it twice. And I should not do it anymore.
A movie that is so thoroughly entertaining and compelling that while you're watching it, it's the only thing that matters in the world.
Are you hosting Fresh Air right now?
I don't know what I'm doing.
You're just very subdued.
I'm David Scandura, joined as always by my co-host and Justus Burkett.
No superlative for me this time.
No, I couldn't think of one.
That's fine. That's fine. I can't think of one either. I mean, other than blue-collar male stripper.
Yeah, I guess.
Just right off the dome. I don't know. Former trumpet player. Trumpet playing features in this film.
Oh, you used to play trumpet?
Yeah, I did. I played trumpet in band. From when I was in second or third grade to all the way to freshman year of high school.
Oh,
and
we talked about this. I totally forgot. I'm
yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, so then my brother and I put our instruments for band into the back of the truck one day to go to school because he was a senior in high school when I was a freshman. And he played clarinet and I played trumpet in our high school bands. We put the instruments in the bed of the truck one day, and I guess we forgot to close the tailgate, and the instruments just left the back of the truck at some point on our way to school. So my trumpet just was missing and lost on the side of the road somewhere. And that is when I stopped playing trumpet. I literally played trumpet from third grade until I lost my trumpet in ninth grade. And I just never bought another one and just quit band.
I played trumpet from like 4th to 6th grade, I think. My dad had played trumpet in marching band in high school and college. He still had his trumpet.
Yeah.
And I was really interested in trying out for jazz band or concert. I can't remember which one it was.
Yeah.
But band in middle school, in 7th grade. And then I realized that it was gonna the band kids had a specific band schedule, and I realized that it was gonna conflict with some other classes that I was taking in middle school, so I didn't do it.
Damn.
And I remember the band director being like, I was like, hey, maybe I can try out for it next year. And the band director was basically like, yeah, go fuck yourself.
Wow.
I didn't say that, but that was the tone. I was like, okay, you're kind of a dick.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Why so rude, I wonder?
I don't know. I think it's like some theater programs are like that too. If you turn them down or leave them for someone else, it's like really, I don't know, it's just kind of like an elitist.
I think it's because the teachers who run that shit are people who wanted to be like career musicians or career actors and stuff and were unable to make a career out of it, and so they're running a high school marching band or whatever, and so they just like become little dictators of this world because it's like the only place that they've ever felt successful, which is sad. But yeah, we're talking about the full Monty today.
You ever taken your clothes off for money?
I have not. No. Have you ever taken your clothes off for money?
No.
I guess before we get into the full Monty, I do need to ask, how are you, David? How are you doing?
I'm good.
Yeah.
How are you doing?
I'm also good.
I'm fucking tired.
Yeah.
I'm tired as shit.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. I took 2 naps yesterday.
Uh-huh.
I slept until like noon, and then I got up for a bit, and then I went back to bed at 4 and slept until 6.
Yeah.
So, and then today I don't know, when did I go to bed last night? Like 11:30, and then I woke up at 9.
Uh-huh.
So I've just been sleeping because
That's a lot of sleep.
show's over and I'm tired, I guess.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, I am not that tired. I'm good and not that tired.
That's good.
So, we can talk about a movie.
Yeah, we're
That's
talking
what
about
we're gonna
the
do.
Full Monty.
The Full Monty. This movie was nominated for 3 Academy Awards at the 1998 Academy Awards. It was nominated for Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Original Screenplay, which, when you watch this movie, feels like not unearned necessarily, but also completely nuts.
It's a little surprising, I'd say.
Yes, that the Academy like looked at this movie and was like, yeah, Best Picture, right? Because it's like, it's just not a it has like sort of the emotional beats of like an Oscar Best Picture type movie, but the subject matter is not, and the tone is not usually what you expect out of a Best Picture nominee.
Mhm.
Lost to Titanic. Probably correct.
Deservedly so.
Yes, yeah.
I'm not the biggest fan of Titanic, but I get it. I need to watch that again, but yeah.
Yeah, I understand rewarding James Cameron's technical marvel Titanic over this 91-minute long movie where a bunch of working dudes decide that a get-rich-quick scheme is to imitate the Chippendales.
Yeah, this movie is the words that come to mind are quaint,
yeah,
and charming.
yes.
And
It's funny that it's quaint and charming, and also literally the entire plot of this movie hinges upon 5 dudes showing their penises to a huge crowd of people.
Yeah.
Like, it's quaint and charming, and it is about these guys taking their cocks and balls out in front of a bunch of people for money.
I have a hot take for you, and I'm
Yeah.
interested to see what you think.
Uh-huh.
This is the anti-Fight Club.
Yes, I think so. I explain what you mean by that for our listeners, but like, I get it and I agree.
I think there was this thing happening in the 90s where men were reaching the end of the century and realizing that the world no longer had a place for them.
Yeah, the end of the millennium, really, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
They didn't have their views on masculinity, their views on women were no longer, were starting to change. The world was starting to change around them and leave them behind. And you see that in things like The Sopranos.
Yep.
The whole premise of The Sopranos is like these mobsters at the end of the millennium thinking that their glory days have gone by.
Yep.
And basing all of their opinions on masculinity and their racial pride of being an Italian on gangster movies.
Right.
Stuff like Fight Club is about these men realizing that the world no longer has a place for them and banding together and finding their own new meaning of masculinity and how that interacts with capitalism.
Yeah.
The only difference is in Fight Club, one of them suffers a mental breakdown and the rest of them become terrorists. And in the Full Monty, the guys grow closer together and take their dicks out for money.
Yes, and the deconstruction of traditional masculinity in Fight Club is sort of replaced by nihilism in a way, right? Anarchy and nihilism is what replaces traditional masculinity in the story of Fight Club. And I think in the Full Monty, like, the thing that makes it, like you said, the anti-Fight Club, is that instead what replaces these guys' traditional idea of masculinity in the Full Monty is compassion and empathy and and so it's like a much more positive spin on, yeah, I think you're totally right, like the exact same sort of setup, right? Where it's like, yeah, these guys, because the guys in the Full Monty, like, they're steel workers, they're blue collar dudes whose jobs have been replaced by outsourcing and automation, and so they used to have a place in this community, they used to have a function, they used to like serve a purpose, and now they're just like unmoored from society because like their society has abandoned them.
Yeah.
Right. And like it is very difficult to be someone who buys into the mythos of traditional masculinity and also have no function or purpose, right? Because the entire crux of traditional masculinity is that you must be useful. Like usefulness above all else is of paramount importance to traditional masculinity. So it's like as soon as you are not serving a purpose, like that's just like a recipe for like disaster. And I like how that's represented in this movie because it's like these guys are not this is not a dark like heavy movie, but these guys are experiencing problems that are not light or fun or small.
And the movie occasionally treats them as jokes and plays them for comedy, but it also does have a really sweet, big heart beating underneath everything.
Yeah.
So it really makes you feel for these guys and care for these guys.
Yeah.
When they are experiencing, issues like body image
Yes.
and trouble in their relationships.
Yes.
And we even have like hints of two guys realizing that they might actually be in love with each other in this movie or have feelings
I think it's
for each other.
more than a hint, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The movie doesn't really follow through with it, is what I'm saying.
Right. That's true.
But yeah, and shit like depression and suicide.
Yeah.
I do find it funny because this movie takes place in Sheffield. It takes place in the northern area of Great Britain. My perception,
Northern England, I think, right?
Yeah.
Sheffield's Northern England.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My perception for what this region is like is based entirely on like interviews with 70s heavy metal musicians. Because it's like Black Sabbath and Judas Priest will be like,
right.
Yeah, we all fucking worked at the steel mills. And it was fucking depressing and gray and rainy and shitty all the time.
Yeah.
So then we started making heavy metal. And it's like, okay, that's...
Yeah.
So instead of making heavy metal, these guys are taking their dicks out.
Yep. That's right. Because they see it as the easiest opportunity that has presented itself, right? Like basically the setup for it, the entire thing is like the Chippendales dancers come to town, they see that those guys draw a huge crowd and get paid a lot of money and hear about, ticket sales adding up to like 10,000 quid or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're basically like, well, we have dicks. We can do that. And I love that that's like all it is. It's basically just like a get rich quick scheme. Because this movie treats like them stripping and like sex work in general. There are some people in the movie who treat it as bad and reprehensible and like stigmatize it. But mostly the attitude of the people in the movie and even the attitude of the movie itself is sort of like kind of bemused, right? Like a lot of the people who encounter them aren't like, you shouldn't be doing that. That's wrong. They're just like, huh, weird. Right? And I like that. I like that this is a movie about sex work where sex work is treated not just by the movie, but also by like some of the characters as just like, yeah, it's just like another thing you can do. And like, yeah, you might not expect to see us being the types of people who would do it. Right? But it's like, I like that it's like very even-handed. And that like when people are like very like anti what they're doing, it's presented by the movie as like, look at these like fucking stuck up like stuffy busybodies,
I appreciate that the joke of this movie basically boils down to, isn't it a little funny that these these middle-aged working class English blokes want to strip?
Yeah.
Anyway, we're gonna move on from it and we're gonna treat it seriously now.
Right.
It's like, because I think when I saw this movie when I was younger,
Yeah.
when I was like in high school probably, and my parents rented it or something.
Yeah.
And at that time, as I'm sure will surprise no one, I had a lot of different opinions about masculinity and engaging with stuff that allows men to be sexual and express themselves in a way that doesn't fit into like traditional masculine standards. So I came into this movie with a little bit of apprehension. Like, I don't know if I want to watch a movie about a bunch of dudes stripping. Like,
Right.
that sounds fucking gay or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah.
And I remember watching it and being much like I felt on this viewing, very amused and charmed and impressed with it.
Yeah.
And felt like the way that it treated that subject matter was handled really well.
Yeah.
And in a way where it's like it's almost not even really the point of the movie.
Right.
It's not. It's about these men discovering themselves and bonding in these difficult situations together.
Yeah.
And finding something that they seem to be legitimately passionate about.
Right.
And that's when the joke ends.
Right. And that's, I kind of think, the other big thing that this movie is about for me, other than like masculinity and everything that's wrapped up in that, from body image to relationships to whatever, right? The other thing that I think the movie is about is like, I just think this is a movie that is about making art.
It's kind of like School of Rock.
Yeah.
Or it follows that similar sort of arc, and it ends with a big show at the end, and
Yeah.
you treat that as the climax.
Right. I think it's a movie about like the act of creation, and the act of creation being collaborative and personal, and how art is defined by your circumstances, but it's also defined by your identity and stuff. And like the art that they end up creating is them taking their clothes off and dancing around to "You Can Leave Your Hat On" by Joe Cocker. But like it hits just as well for me as any other movie that is about that is about the act of artistic creation, because it's like, yeah, like what they're doing doesn't have any less intrinsic value than like a guy writing a novel or whatever. It's like they're still creating art and putting it out into the world and having it seen and appreciated by people. And so like that really hit me this time watching it, where I was like, those guys waggling their dicks around is like, that's them expressing themselves.
Yeah.
And there's something very beautiful about that. And I think the movie allows it to be beautiful and gives it space to like be about that, but yeah. My history with this movie is pretty similar to yours. I saw it when I was maybe like early high school aged, or maybe even in middle school. I saw it a couple times because, as I mentioned on our previous episode, my mom's a big fan of this movie. She likes this movie a lot. So it, she would be watching it, and I think I sat down with her a couple times and saw it, but I hadn't gone back to it in a long, long time. So I was interested to see how it compared to my memory of it, and it turns out I remembered this movie pretty well.
Yeah, I had only seen it that one time and basically remembered very little of it, other than the fact that I remember enjoying it.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that you picked it, because it was definitely worth revisiting.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's we'll get into it a little bit more. I didn't take notes, so I'm just sort of freestyling this off the top of my dome.
Just winging it.
Yeah, just waving it around like a dick. I don't know.
Waggling around my opinion of this movie freely. Helicoptering it around.
Yeah.
while funky jazz music plays. I like the newsreel intro to this movie.
Yeah.
Where it's like, the city of Sheffield. The old-timey British guy talking very like rapid fire over like grainy video footage, and just telling you facts thing. Like, that always works for me as a joke in and of itself. It's just like always funny to hear one of those guys be like, and here you see the hard-working men of Sheffield. They are welding the steel that is used in all of our glorious British buildings.
Yeah, I was surprised by the intro, because again, I've forgotten most of what was in this movie.
Yeah.
But the intro needs to be there, because I think it does a very good job of setting up the socioeconomic themes of the movie.
Yeah, and also the
And
location.
establishing the setting.
Yeah, because like Sheffield in this movie it's very important and very specific, right? That these guys live in this town at this time, right? And it's both specific and also highly relatable because it's like, despite never having lived in Sheffield and knowing nothing about steelworking, this newsreel intro and then the following kind of setup with Gaz and Dave and Nath like stealing scrap from from the old steel mill to sell, right? It instantly you're like, oh, I know these guys, right?
Yeah.
Because even though I've never worked at a steel mill or known a steel worker, it's like I've known blue collar dudes, right? And I get this immediately.
Yeah, it's a great little intro to these our main trio of characters. Robert Carlyle playing Gaz.
Yes.
Mark Addy, who
yes.
people will know as Robert Baratheon from Game of Thrones.
Yes.
Playing Dave.
Yes, Robert Carlyle, who most people I guess his best known thing is probably Begbie from Trainspotting.
Probably.
He's also the dad in 28 Weeks Later.
Yeah, that's another. I feel like that's probably his biggest role, like as far as like crossovers to the U.S.
Yeah.
Or he's also the villain in The World Is Not Enough.
Yes. He's also Rumpelstiltskin on the TV show Once Upon a Time on ABC, which a shocking number of people know him from that because apparently a fuckload of people watch that show.
I've seen that show.
I saw like the beginning of the first season because it was just on.
Mm-hmm.
It was just airing while I was living with my parents, and then they were like, "This is not good." We stopped watching.
It's really not. I watched a little bit of it because I had a roommate who watched it obsessively. She watched shit like that and Vampire Diaries and Gossip Girl, which I'm not shitting on Gossip Girl, but like I caught a lot of those CW, ABC sort of shows. If you want Once Upon a Time but good, read the Fables comic book series. It's legitimately a very good comic book series.
Yes, but Robert Carlyle is not in that because he's a human man and not a drawing.
Very happy whenever Robert Carlyle shows up in something. Though.
Oh, yes, me as well.
He's England's. He's the Scottish Steve Buscemi.
Yeah,
where he's just kind of lanky and looks like a weird frog man.
Yes,
and is owning it.
Yes, and also
with there's the joke early when they're stealing the tape.
Yeah,
and he tells Dave that like you're lovable and cute or whatever, and I look like a serial killer.
I have a serial killer painted on my forehead.
Yeah,
or
it's
whatever.
It's like yeah, you do, Robert Carlyle. good catch there.
Yeah. That's a good joke. Yeah, and yet, so he looks like this like scummy little leathery weirdo. And yet in this movie, I'm also like, by the time, here's the thing about this movie. Are
you going to say that he's hot?
Well, here's the thing.
Are you going to say that he's hot?
I'm going to say they're all hot.
Okay.
Is the thing. That is the thing. So like this movie obviously is predicated on the premise is like you would never expect to see these dudes, this group of dudes, these 5 or 6, however many there are, dudes stripping, right?
Mm-hmm.
None of them, except for the one guy with the big cock who's like kind of young and conventionally attractive.
Yeah.
He's maybe the outlier. But all the rest of them, it's like these are dudes that you would not expect to be male strippers. Because a couple of them are really old. Robert Carlyle is like this weird, spindly, scarecrow-looking motherfucker. Mark Addy's a little bit of a larger gentleman. And then there's like the ginger guy who's like super pale and kind of has like they say he's pigeon-chested, right? He just doesn't have a very traditionally attractive physique, right? And yet, at the end of this movie, when they do the final number, and a lot of it is down to how it is shot and the performances, those guys are hot at the end of this movie. And I think the movie does a good job of making them hot at the end of the movie and making you see what the audience is seeing and being like, damn, these like regular guys who don't look like anything special have like sex appeal because they're confident.
Yeah, so
right?
I was giving you shit, but I do agree with you. I think they're hot.
They're hot. At the end of the movie, they're hot.
And it boils down to the confidence
Yes.
thing.
But I think, but the thing with Gaz is he's the most confident the earliest.
Yeah.
So I'm like, he is also kind of hot at other points in this movie because he's just exuding, like he's very, very charming.
There was someone you were talking about on the show that was like, they were like leathery and weathered, and was it Lance Henriksen in Stone Cold?
Probably.
Because Robert Carlyle sort of has that going for him.
Yes.
And it also helps that he's wearing a leather jacket like
yes,
Lance Henriksen is.
Yes, and he also has an earring. Mark Addy also has an earring.
Mm-hmm.
Working very well for both of them. But yeah, like he's just got this like, and he's been to prison.
Yeah.
He's just got kind of this like edgy, like, you know, he smells like old cigarettes, and he's fucking skin and bones, and yet at the same time, it's kind of like, you know, I wouldn't kick him out of bed.
Yeah, he's edgy and a bit of a bad boy and a rebel, and also kind of a deadbeat.
Yes.
And at the start of this movie, he's like he's throwing around some not so kind slurs.
Yes, he does. He does use the word poofter to describe the Chippendales,
Mhm.
which is a homophobic slur, and a thing that makes it okay that the protagonist of this movie says that is because the movie does its job in correcting that from him.
Yeah,
right?
I think the stance of the movie is like Gaz is a piece of shit,
and he learns stuff.
But he learns stuff, and he's kind of like a piece of shit with a heart of gold. Like,
Right. And so it's like, yeah, he's like casually homophobic, not from like a malicious place, just like kind of the casual homophobia that he doesn't even really think about. He just kind of tosses it out.
Been instilled in him by society, by traditional standards of masculinity,
and then by the end of the movie, it's very clear that it's like, no, this guy doesn't necessarily think that way anymore. He's gonna think twice before he just like calls someone a poofter just offhand.
Yeah, and it's not like we have a big scene or anything like that. It's just he just stops saying it, and you notice it.
And you can tell, you basically can tell why, right? It's because by then he has 2 gay friends, right? And has become a male stripper. So he's like had experiences that have changed his mind about stuff like that, right? But yeah, so speaking of Gaz being a deadbeat dad, I fucking love that he takes his kid scrap hunting with him. The stuff that he does with his kid in this movie just overall is hilarious. Like the kid is there for everything.
Yeah.
So I love that he like is fucking salvaging scrap to, you know, have 2 pennies to rub together for, I don't know, fucking cigarettes and and pints. And he's just like bringing his kid along. And like the whole scene with the kid getting pissed off and fucking abandoning them on the car in the middle of the river is very funny.
Yeah.
I fucking love the guy walking his dog walking by, and Mark Addy is like expecting Robert Carlyle to like ask for help. And I don't even remember what he says, but it's something
they
very
just say
British.
Hello.
Yeah, but they don't say hello though. They say some weird ass British.
Yeah.
Like, but
this movie probably should have come with subtitles just
yes,
just permanently on the film.
Yes, this movie is in the English language, but it is also in the English language. Like it is not in American English. This movie is in British English.
And this ain't no BBC Downton Abbey.
No.
These are real salt of the earth guys.
Yeah, these guys are saying words like every fucking 20 seconds where you're like, what the fuck does that mean? And you can usually figure it out because of context. Like usually based on context, you're like, okay, like I got that. But some of the time I'm like, did not get that one at all. Between the accent and the weird ass fucking northern slang, I was like, nope, you lost me. But that's part of the charm of this movie for an American, I think.
Yeah.
It is sort of like being immersed in another culture that's like close enough to your own that it's recognizable, but occasionally they're saying shit and you're like, I don't know what that means.
You mentioned Robert Carlyle's kid. His name is Nath.
Yes, Nathan or Nath. Yeah.
Yeah. What did I gotta ask you, because precocious child.
Yes, we are known skeptics of child actors and child characters and stuff. So it makes sense to ask the question.
Yeah, what do you think of him?
I think Nath rules. I love this kid. I think this is a well-written character, and I think it's a really good performance. And the whole time I was like, fucking love Nath. I think he's great.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about Nath?
I think a really, really well-written character. I think the performance is fine.
Yeah.
I'm not blown away by the performance, but you know what this performance isn't? It isn't an overly precocious child saying the lines the way that their parents have told them to do it just off camera.
Yes, and it's also, he's not, because of that, he's not annoying. And he's like, his function in the story is like very important to the movie. It's not like a kid. He's not being deployed the way sometimes a movie about like fatherhood or whatever will deploy a kid, where it's like, oh, this is a shortcut to making you give a shit about the guy you're actually supposed to give a shit about, right? It's like, no, Nath is like a full character in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And he has an arc too, because when he starts out the movie, he's sort of like pissed off and over his dad's like get rich schemes and kind of doesn't want any part of it, and seems more like, I want to be at my mom's and I don't really want to hang out with my dad because he's always doing this dumb, embarrassing shit. And by the end of the movie, he's so proud of his dad, right? So he's not just like an entry point to Robert Carlyle's arc. It's like, no, he has his own, he's a fully actualized character with his own arc, and you can follow like how he's feeling about things scene to scene, which I feel like a lot of the time what is annoying about child characters in movies like this is that they don't have that. They basically serve as like a plot device for an adult character, right? Instead of like being a full person. And Nath is like a full person.
Yeah, and if anything, I think Nath complicates our feelings on Gaz.
Yes.
Because it's like, okay, Gaz has this fucking kid that he's wrapping up in his schemes to get money quick and steal shit. And then he's also dragging him along for this this stripping thing.
Yes. Nathan is their stage manager for their stripping show. He straight up is stage managing them, which I think is very funny. But yeah, and it's like there's an element to their dynamic where, like, at least for us, watching this movie, dudes, right? Dudes in their 30s. I feel like a lot of Gaz's behavior, you're like, fuck yeah, dog, dudes rock, right? But then, like, to your point, seeing that behavior through Nathan's POV, you're kind of like, oh yeah, but like, he actually kind of does suck as a dad.
Yeah.
You know? And it becomes way less like, dudes rock, fuck yeah.
Well, and it becomes more than just like, oh, he's a deadbeat, but he loves his kid.
Right.
Which I think a lot of like, fuck it, like The Judge. The Judge is like, what's a redeeming quality of Robert Downey Jr.?
Right.
He loves his kid, but he's also just like a scumbag piece of shit.
Right. And we'll illustrate that by bringing the kid in for the second act of the movie and then completely forgetting about her for the third act.
And then, but I don't think this ever...
Sorry, we're not here to talk about The Judge more. As much as
we could probably do another 2 hours on The Judge.
We could just turn the full Monty episode into The Judge Part 2.
There's so much stuff we missed.
I mean, I did forget to mention that movie does treat Robert Duvall's character breaking 28 years of sobriety as like a funny, charming little character moment. It's like, oh, here's a silly thing he could do. Have a glass of whiskey after almost 3 decades of sobriety. I was like, I don't know if that's how we should be treating that.
There's one scene where Robert Downey Jr. goes to get like the newspaper in the morning or something, and I think it's when the cops show up and are like, "Hey, we found blood on the judge's car."
Yeah.
He walks out on like the hard gravel driveway completely barefoot, and I'm like,
fuck,
dude, that looks unfucking comfortable. And the only reason I say that is because I think the movie has a shot of his feet walking on the driveway, on the gravel.
A baffling film.
We go frame by frame with that fucking thing. one thing I was gonna mention
About the full Monty or about the judge?
about the full Monty.
Okay.
Like the judge, this movie has a pissing scene in it.
Oh yes,
And
which is pretty much where we are, because like they leave the scrapyard. He has like his first kind of little spat with Nath, where Nath is like embarrassed by him,
Mhm.
and then basically the next thing they do is go to the Chippendale show.
Yeah.
They sneak into the Chippendale show because Mark Addy's wife is there.
Mhm.
But it's women only, so they sneak in through the window, which is very funny because Mark Addy's too fat to get it through the window, and
Yeah.
there's a joke about that. But yes, there is a pissing scene here.
It's the wives are go into the men's restroom for whatever reason
Because it's
there's
women
no
only, so
women
nobody's
only,
using
so-
the men's. Yeah.
And then one of the women pisses like a man. And I was
Yes.
gonna ask, is this our first lady piss on the show?
I do believe it is our first lady piss on the show. Yes. I don't think we've had another movie that has contained a lady pissing.
At least like nothing this prominent. Like
Yes. But there's a full piss stream.
Yeah.
Yes.
She's standing up and pissing in the urinal, or not really the
I
urinal.
think-
The
the
British
trough.
like piss trough.
Which for half a second, I did think she was just pissing on the wall. And I was like, that is psycho shit.
when I went to Australia, they have those like piss troughs things, and I
Yeah.
was extremely confused.
Yeah, you just kind of stand in front of it's like a big old tub, or like sometimes it's just like a little strip, like a gutter.
Yeah.
Right? You just piss into that gutter. Sometimes a guy stands right next to you while you're doing it, and you just gotta. You must continue. I don't get the pee performance anxiety thing. I know a lot of guys do, but I do not. I think it helped that one of our college professors, who will remain nameless, would occasionally come into the bathroom while you were peeing and take the urinal next to you, and then like slap you on the shoulder and be like, "How you doing?" Right?
What the fuck?
Yeah. So I feel like I was like, if any of the pee anxiety thing in me remained in college, I think that those experiences just like made it vanish entirely.
Yeah, I mean, I was in Boy Scouts, so you had to like use the woods as your bathroom.
Right.
But I don't think I could do a piss trough. I think I'd be picking a stall if I
Yeah.
had to piss.
Yeah.
Uh,
Anyway, so this lady pisses. Another on-screen piss appearance.
yeah.
Log that in the fucking for the record.
We should have a spreadsheet for that. Of
How many
bodily
on-screen
fluids.
bodily fluids? Yeah.
Because I think the judge might take it.
I
'Cause
think
we
probably
got,
has the highest.
we
yeah.
got pee, we got poop, we
Yeah.
got vomit.
Yes.
The only thing we don't have is cum.
Right. There was also spit, because Grace Zabriskie
spit.
spits on the window.
Yeah, spit.
So there's also spit prominently featured in the judge.
There's blood, but I wouldn't necessarily count blood because we talk about plenty of movies that have blood in them.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think the judge might be the highest bodily fluid movie so far.
Jesus Christ.
Anyway, and we covered Reanimator.
There's tons of goop in that.
Yeah, mostly it's blood goop though. Not a lot of variety in the types of goop. But well, that's not entirely true. Anyway, so another funny thing that happens in this scene. By the way, the lady who pisses into the trough is Mark Addy's wife.
Okay.
Which is just a funny detail when you see her later in the movie, and you're like, oh yeah, the lady who is pissing.
We didn't talk about him yet. Mark Addy,
Yeah,
so fucking good in this.
he's amazing. He's really really incredible.
As
in
someone
this
who's
movie.
used to seeing him as Robert Baratheon, which is a very big,
Yeah,
bravado kind of performance.
yeah,
Seeing him play something a lot smaller and nuanced and very touching.
yeah.
While also being very funny and,
Yeah.
and nailing the comedy in this movie. I think he was probably the standout performance for me on this watching the movie.
For me, it was Tom Wilkinson.
Love Tom Wilkinson.
Yes,
One of the best guys to ever be in a movie.
yes. I love Mark Addy in this, but the standout for me was Tom Wilkinson because he's going between like the guy that you like early on. He's the guy you hate the most
Mhm.
in the movie, right? He's like their old foreman from the steel mill. And he's like giving him shit at the unemployment office. He's the one who delivers he's fat and you're thin and you're both fucking ugly, which is great. But then when they fuck up his job interview, he has like that like genuinely heartbreaking scene, and like his home life stuff with his wife, like all of that shit. I was like, this watch specifically, I was like, holy shit, this character is so well written and so well acted, and Tom Wilkinson is like breaking my fucking heart right now in this, like, to be clear, pretty straightforward comedy. Like, I wouldn't even call this a comedy drama. Like, it's a comedy. Every scene has jokes in it, right? But it's just like, there's so much like heart put into it, and I like his performance, especially this time for me. I was like, man, this is really hitting.
Yeah, I think Wilkinson's great in this.
Yeah,
and it's so refreshing to hear him not try to do an American accent like so many when he needs to be some government guy in an action movie.
Right.
But I think it was great, and I love that moment where they fuck up his job interview, and he does a good job making you feel for him. And I was gonna ask, does this have a cry count for you?
It does. I didn't know if you would be surprised by that or not. But yes, I did cry watching this movie.
I'm not, because I almost did.
Yes. I cried watching this movie. You can now guess how many times if you like.
I'm gonna guess twice.
Okay. The official guess is 2. I cried once watching this movie. I almost cried twice, but I only fully got tears out. It only fully got tears out of me once. Which was obviously when Mark Addy says to his wife, who wants to see this dance about himself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she says, "Me, Dave."
That's what almost made me cry.
Yep, it did make me cry.
Yeah, the tears were welling up, but they did not fall.
Yes. And to be clear, even though I was just praising Tom Wilkinson a lot, like Mark Addy, like is also insanely good in this movie, and like. That's why I was crying in that scene, is because I fucking love this character so much. Because he's just like, he's like all of us, right? Like he is like standing in as a dude who struggles with self-image and like self-esteem, and he has like marital problems. He has a good marriage and a strong marriage, but it's clear that like things are maybe feeling like a little strained.
Yeah.
And there's allusions to the fact that it might be like sexual performance issues. And like all of that, it's like he's representing everything that is like hard and shitty about being a dude, right? So I think just watching this movie like as a man, Dave breaks your heart, because it's like he's all of us. Like we've all been there. We've all been looking in the mirror and being like, oh, I fucking hate how my like love handles look, and I fucking I wish I didn't have this gut, and I wish that I whatever,
and made excuses about what your diet's like,
right?
And saying that you've tried, but you really haven't been. It's a really, really well-written character, and a deeply moving performance.
Yeah, the moment that made me the saddest, because the moment that made me cry is sort of like a happy, poignant character moment.
Yeah.
But the moment that made me the saddest was when he's in bed with his wife, Jeannie, and she starts like kissing him, and it's actually the less dramatic moment that made me the saddest, because there is the one where he gets into bed and they like start making out, and then he's like, I can't do it, and he leaves, and that's when he goes into the shed and eats a candy bar and wraps himself up in saran wrap. But the other one made me sadder, which is like she's trying to kiss him and like initiate something, and he basically says something like, like, I'm beat, like I'm sorry, like I don't have any energy, and she just turns the light off. That one made me really sad, because it was so clear the way that the movie is presenting it, because this is like as he's dealing with all this body image stuff, is it's like he just doesn't see himself as sexually available to his wife in that moment, because he does not feel sexually desirable, and it's like that made me so sad. Because like, yeah, I just feel like that's a very relatable thing. And it's just like, man, like, you're beautiful, Dave. You're and Jeannie is like presented as a good wife. Like, she's trying to communicate that to him.
Yeah.
But it's hard when you fucking are down on yourself to believe that like somebody like finds you attractive or whatever. So, yeah, all that shit really, really worked for me. Anyway, but so basically, like, along the plot trajectory, right? They've gone into the Chippendales. Oh, but sorry, I know this. We're bouncing all over the place. But before we leave the Chippendales, I do think it's really fucking funny that Gaz sends in Nath to find Auntie Jean, right? Mark Addy's wife.
And Nath is just drinking leftover beer.
He beelines it. Like, Gaz is like, yeah, go find Auntie Jean. And he's like, yeah, okay. And he just beelines to this table with this mostly full beer that like someone's drank some of. And he just starts fucking chugging this beer off the table. And he's like going around to other tables and just drinking. And Robert Carlyle's like, fuck. Like,
Well, then the next morning, he's walking him to school or whatever, and he's like, "Yeah, well, that's a hangover."
yeah.
It's like this kid got a fucking hangover from drinking leftover beers.
It rocks so hard. I love that it's like, it's not like he starts wandering through the club looking for Jean and then starts doing it. It's like, no, as soon as he is out of that bathroom and he knows that his dad isn't going to follow him, he's like, beer. It's so fucking funny. Yeah. And so like we meet Gaz's ex-girlfriend, ex-wife, it's not really clear, but the mother of his child, who is now in a relationship with Barry, this fucking guy. I like, he is not presented as, we don't learn anything about him that makes us dislike him. It's all in the performance. Like, he's not really written as like a bad person, but the guy who is playing Barry he first of all has the most punchable face of all time.
Well, it's not even like she left Robert Carlyle for like the younger, hotter man.
Oh no, this guy
looks like a fucking dork.
Yes, I would argue he is less handsome than Robert Carlyle. But much taller though. Anyway, fuck Barry. All my homies hate Barry. He delivers every line with like this air of superiority where I'm just like, fuck you. You think you're better than me, Barry? I'll show you. Which is very much Robert Carlyle's reaction to him.
Yeah, I think that's where I got it the most, is I just latched onto Robert Carlyle dressing him down every chance that he got.
Yeah. But yeah, so like there's tension with the whole custody situation. Basically, Robert Carlyle is way behind on child support, and needs to make up the money. And his ex-wife basically gives him an ultimatum, being like, if I don't see that money, like, you're not gonna see your kid anymore.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the fucking inciting incident for the whole rest of the movie. Is he needs money fast so that he can continue having a relationship with his kid, who, despite him being kind of a shitty deadbeat dad, we do see that it's very clear that he like actually really loves this kid, and it would like ruin him to not have his kid in his life. Like, that's presented in a very like unambiguous way in this movie, and I think it's really effective.
I think so too.
As like the plot engine. So they're at the job office. They get dressed down by fucking Tom Wilkinson. And that's when like they start getting the idea to like become male strippers. And I like that nobody thinks they're serious about it until like an hour into this 91-minute movie. Like a full hour of this movie, they're like, what if we did this? Wouldn't that be silly? And then it kind of like bounces around to them just kind of living their everyday lives. And every once in a while we kind of go back to the stripper thing.
Yeah.
And then like at an hour into the movie, it's like, oh, we're really doing this actually. Which I just sort of like that they treat it kind of like as a loose like narrative thing, and let you spend a lot more time with just the guys.
I wish it had a little bit more of the stripping stuff.
Yeah.
Just them learning the dances and because their dynamic is great.
Yeah.
And I love the way that it showcases the group's dynamic in those scenes. So I just wish we had a little bit more of that, but that's a minor quibble that I have with this thing.
Yeah.
So they start basically looking for other guys. The first one that they find, I don't remember his name. He's the redhead guy.
Lomper.
Lomper.
Yes,
Jesus.
which I assume is a last name. But that's the only way that he's referred to in the movie.
Because Guy's the hot dude with the big dick.
Yes, Guy has the huge cock.
And then
Horse is the elderly, the older black guy.
Yeah.
And then Tom Wilkinson is Gerald, right? And then we have Dave and Gaz.
Yeah. So they meet Lomper because he's trying to kill himself.
This is my favorite scene in this entire movie.
Funny. It's so funny that Mark Addy finds his car is stopped at the side of the road. He fixes it and then doesn't notice the rubber tubing piping exhaust fumes into the car while he's talking to him until he leaves him and walks like 30 feet away and then realizes
you see the realization hit his face where he's like, oh shit.
Yeah. And like it's funny. It's also sad and depressing. Like it treats it's
yes.
kind of, it's not a black, this isn't like a black comedy.
This is a very dark comic moment of this movie.
Yes.
Though.
And
yeah.
I think it's done well. And then immediately afterwards when they're like talking to him and he's like, I don't have any friends. And he's like, and then they're like, well, now you do.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's a really sweet moment. It's really,
yeah.
I love that they just like immediately embrace him.
Yeah. I do love that the dark comedy sort of enables the kind of like sweetness of that moment in a very like I think elegant way, because it's like there's the sort of black comedy of the scene with the car, which by the way, after he realizes that he just fixed this guy's car, which enabled this guy to continue killing himself and goes back to save him. He throws the door open and pulls Lomper out, and then Lomper calls him a wanker and he shoves him back in the car and closes the door again. Or a bastard, I think. He calls him a bastard.
I think it's a bastard.
Yeah. He's like, what are you doing, you bastard? And Marchetti's like, all right. Just toss him back in. And then he starts pounding to get out. And then we cut. But I also really like that before we hit the moment where Lomper's like, well, I don't have any friends. And Gaz is basically like, the fuck are you talking about? Like, we're your friends, you idiot. Right? We just saved your life. They're before that, they're all just giving him suggestions about how to kill himself. It's just the three of them kind of sitting on this grassy hillside overlooking Sheffield, talking about ways they could kill themselves. And I was like, man, for a movie that came out in 1997, this also just feels very 2024 coded. Like, just going on Twitter feels this way. Where it's like people being like, hey, this is where I hang out with my friends, and we all just talk about ways that the world's gonna end and we're all gonna fucking die. I don't know. It felt like a little bit like a Twitter group chat to me.
Well, they don't go into a ton of detail with what he has going on in his life, other than just like can't find a job, living in Sheffield's a shithole.
Yeah.
And then it adds this extra layer of that the movie doesn't spend a ton of time exploring, of this guy's also kind of struggling with his sexuality at this point.
Yes.
And that's been happening in the background this whole time.
Yes. He's also taking care of his ailing mother. And when he gets home after meeting Gaz and Dave, his elderly mother is trying to walk up the stairs. And you see him come in and her be like, where were you? And him being like, I got cut up. And then he carries his mom up the stairs very tenderly. And it's like, it's a very powerful moment, because it's like, yeah, if Gaz and Dave hadn't come along, like, he wouldn't have come home to carry her up the stairs, you know? So yeah, there's that whole thing as well.
Yeah. So I think it, his situation is probably something that these guys have run into before and can relate to,
right,
just based on where they live and the experiences that their friends have been going through.
Right. And they all feel that way to some extent, right?
Yeah.
All of these guys feel like hopeless and depressed to some extent, right? And like Lomper's the only one who we see like attempt suicide, but it's very clear that like all of these dudes are feeling downtrodden and at the end of their rope and burned out, right? So yeah, then they start holding auditions after they get, so they also kind of recruit Gerald around here before the like auditions, I think, because Gerald's at them. Yeah. And the way that they get him is by fucking making him bomb a job interview. Because he's been talking shit to them at the unemployment office where they all hang out all day.
Yeah.
Because they're just all trying to get work. And so then Gerald gets a job interview. And they also find out that Gerald has been lying to his wife about having a job. He says something in passing about like when he's at work or whatever. So they now know that he's like he's maintaining a facade with his wife to pretend that he's employed when he's not.
Well, and Gaz, Dave, Lomper, and Nath have all started hanging out together.
Right.
And one night they find out that Gerald is at this dance club.
Oh yeah.
And like this ballroom dancing sort of class. 'Cause
Right.
They're going to see, if they can. They're trying to figure out how to dance.
Right. They need dancing tips for their stripping routine, so they're going to a ballroom dance class.
And they see him dancing with his wife, and it's very funny when he like sees them spying on him, and then they're all making funny faces at him, and he has to keep dancing.
Yeah, I do like that even Nath is getting in on making faces at him through the window. But yeah, and that's where the reveal happens, where he accidentally or his wife accidentally reveals to these guys who are like fucking like rivals with him that he is apparently employed even according to her, which is not true. And so like they know like the jig's up, they now have like leverage over him. And then they like they show up at his house and just start giving him shit in the morning when he's leaving for work. And then I think try to blackmail him basically, which is like, teach us to dance because now we have information that you don't want your wife to know.
Well, he has this like prize collection of garden gnomes that we learn are his garden gnomes.
Yes.
It's not like his wife is into them.
No, the garden gnomes are Gerald's thing.
So during the job interview, they distract him by having the garden gnomes fight each other.
This shit is so fucking funny.
And then they break one. And I love...
It's so fucking funny, the little garden gnomes just popping up over the interviewing panel's heads and like, in the window.
And I love when they super... Like, to make up to him.
Yes.
Make it up to him. They super glue it back together.
Yes.
And they give it to him, and he's, like, genuinely touched by this.
Yes, and then they also buy him a little wheelbarrow for the garden gnome, like,
It's for the gnomes, obviously,
right?
Or whatever.
Enough for you. The wheels go around, but I thought you could put it by the wishing well and make a little bit of a feature. Yeah. Ta lads, ta very much. But I love. First of all, I love the line that Robert Carlyle says when things are getting a little too sensitive and real between him and Gerald in that scene. He's like, because they have this very touching, heartfelt moment where he's basically giving this wheelbarrow as an apology. And and then like things sit in that kind of vulnerable place for longer than Gaz is comfortable with. And he just turns to Dave and goes, "Cigarette me for fuck's sake." Which I love. But yeah, this is after there's a scene in between there, which is my favorite Tom Wilkinson scene in the whole movie, which is when he breaks down at Dave and Gaz for fucking up his job interview.
Yeah.
And initially he's like trying to fight them, like he's like trying to beat the shit out of him. But then he just breaks down and he's like, why did you do it? Like, I needed that job. Like, and he has like this great little mini monologue where he's talking about like his my wife's on High Street with the fucking MasterCard spending, and just the way he delivers it is so good. But it's like you see the desperation.
She's talking about us doing a skiing holiday.
Yeah. And they're like, why don't you just tell her? And he's like, how can I tell this woman that I haven't had a job for 6 months, right? He just like can't. And so much of that is like wrapped up in the masculinity thing of it.
Well,
like,
yeah, because
admitting failure is like a cardinal sin.
Admitting failure and also not being able to provide,
right?
Which society deems that men
you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I love that whole moment, and the key thing about it is it turns you from being like anti-Gerald because he's been an asshole to these guys that you like. It turns you from being anti-Gerald to ardently pro-Gerald in one scene. Literally, as soon as he delivers that little thing, he has that little breakdown, you're like, I love this guy and I just want him to succeed. Right? So then they start doing the auditions. And this is where we meet Horse, Mr. Horse. That's how he introduces himself. And that's the older black member of the group. And he's got moves. His bum hip is acting up a little bit, but he's still a pretty good dancer.
And Guy is, younger and hot and conventionally attractive.
The Guy audition is so funny.
The way he gets the job is he just takes his pants off.
Right. But first they're like interviewing him and he's coming across as like extremely like vacuous and stupid. Like he seems like an idiot. And then they ask him if he has like any other skills because he can't dance. He tries to do the thing where you run up the wall.
Yes.
But instead he just runs into it. Which is very funny. And then they're like, so you can't dance. You have no skills of any kind. And he's like, nope. And they're like, okay, like, why are you here? And he's like, well, he just takes his pants off. And so the entire time Nath is there. And I love that we get reaction shots from every single character in the room seeing Guy's huge hog, including the actual child who is in this
It
room.
takes so long for someone to be like, hey, maybe the child shouldn't be at the stripping class. Maybe we should get this maybe Child Protective Services needs to step in.
It's truly a testament to how successful this movie is at making you empathize with its core group of characters, that never once are you like, Nath shouldn't be there. Nath should get out of there. It's always like, no, he's stage managing. Like, no, he's running auditions. Yeah, he's looking at this grown man's huge cock. It's fine.
Gonna clip that part out of the episode.
It is just weird because, if you think about it, like on an intellectual level, it's like, no, this child should not be seeing grown men take their pants off in front of him.
Also Horse's family should not.
His niece
watching their stripping routine.
Again, a huge testament to how successful this movie is, that it manages to make that as not weird as possible. Even though, again, if you think about it literally at all, it's quite weird that his niece is going to see his cock. Anyway. So they have their like full crew assembled after the auditions. And like by the way, when they see Guy's huge cock, that's when Robert Carlyle says, "Gentlemen, the lunchbox has landed."
That's such an interesting phrase.
I mean, I think he's just seeing dollar signs is what that's about, right? He's basically like, oh, people will come out for this.
And that's where he got lunchbox from?
I think so. I don't know.
It's a funny line all the same.
So then like the middle bit of this movie is a lot of scenes of them like practicing, getting their routine together, doing research by watching Flashdance, which, by the way, I love that they critique the steelworking in Flash. They're critiquing the welding. Mark Addy's like, her mix is all shite. That joist isn't gonna hold. Like, it's very funny. But it's interspersed with we get a little bit of each of their like personal lives, although a lot less from the guys who aren't Gerald, Gaz, and Dave. Which it's like, I understand it's a 90-minute movie. There's 6 of these guys, so there's only so much runtime to go around. But I do kind of wish that we got more with Horse, Lomper, and Guy, right?
I agree completely.
Yeah.
I think we need more time with these dudes because also because like their performances are all good. The movie just doesn't give them a ton to do.
Yeah.
And when it introduces stuff like the possible relationship between Guy and Lomper, I it's nice and it's sweet and it's well done. I also just wish there was more of a build up to it and we got to know who these guys on a more personal who these guys are on a more personal level
Yeah.
over the course of the movie.
I totally agree. It's like the really rare example where I'm like, I kind of think this movie was too short.
And it wraps up on a freeze frame at the end of the stripping montage, and I'm like, I could maybe use like 5 more minutes of denouement. You know, we need to resolve Robert Carlyle's relationship with his ex, and
Yeah.
we could, you know, what's the future look like for these guys?
Yeah.
You know,
The School of Rock ending where now they're running a stripping school.
Yeah.
They're teaching stripping lessons.
I guess there is a when searching on Hulu for this,
There's a TV
there's
series
a TV
now.
series
Yeah.
apparently.
Yes, which I mean I think most of the main cast is back.
Mhm.
Not Tom Wilkinson because he has sadly passed. But yeah, I would be interested to see if it's any good.
Is this a stage musical too?
Yes, it's a Broadway musical.
Okay.
Yes, there is a Broadway musical version of the Full Monty, which I believe is pretty 1-to-1 with the way the movie does it. But I do think because it's a Broadway musical and the runtime's a little longer, they flesh it out a little bit more.
Mhm.
So I think they do have a little bit more side plots with each of the guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, rare example of a movie that I think you could have added 20 minutes to this thing and it would not have hurt it. So, but like, you know, I still like the version that we got quite a bit.
I do appreciate that this thing moves pretty quickly and has
It's
a nice pace to it.
So breezy. I paused to get up to go to the bathroom and I was shocked because when I paused, I felt like I had been watching the movie for 15 minutes. I was like halfway through the movie. It was like the 45-minute mark and I was like, whoa, like, this thing's flying by. Anyway, so yeah, there's like the scenes of them practicing are very funny.
Mhm.
The scenes of them practicing also highlight a thing about this movie that I do want to touch on, which is the soundtrack. And I say soundtrack, not score, because there is not much original music in this movie. It's a lot of like kind of jazz and like blues and a little bit of disco.
Yeah.
And I think that this soundtrack, I am not being hyperbolic here, is one of the best soundtracks in a movie from the 90s. I think that the Full Monty soundtrack is pretty unimpeachable. And my mom had the CD version of this and like played it in the car all the time. So I remembered the music from this movie better than I remembered this movie. So like maybe I have a little bit of bias coming from that. But like watching the movie and seeing how these songs are deployed, every single fucking needle drop, I was like, yes, all of this, yes. Hot stuff, yes. You can leave your hat on, yes, right? You sexy thing, absolutely. Even the fucking Rock and Roll Part 2 drop, which is usually the worst song that you can do a needle drop for in a movie, fucking lands perfectly in this movie.
I think the soundtrack is really good. I agree. I think the Rock and Roll Part 2 needle drop like lands it really, really well.
Yeah.
Also, you've mentioned a couple of your favorite scenes in the movie. My favorite scene in the movie is I think it's Hot Stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know, after they've you know, the police have found out what they're doing and they've decided to abandon the strip show, when they're all standing in the unemployment line.
Yes.
And they start dancing.
Yes, because Hot Stuff just comes on
grooving and
at the unemployment office, and they all just start doing the choreo perfectly synchronized.
Because I think you said this movie is partially about art and the creation of art,
Mm-hmm.
and I think one thing about artists is art is the thing that you have to do. It's the thing that you have to get out of, you know, and express. And I think that scene is a just great encapsulation of that theme.
Yeah, and it is such like a beautiful wordless sentiment because there's no dialogue in that scene at all. And it's like a beautiful wordless sentiment where it's like, yeah, that guy standing in line ahead of you at the DMV, right, might have some beautiful artistic venture in his soul. right? That is like aching to come out, right? And it's like that externalized. And like you see it kind of from Robert Carlyle's POV, because he's in like the other line and he's looking at all of them in their line. And his reaction is basically he's just like he's like amused but also like touched.
Yeah.
Right? He's like, "Oh man, look at those guys," right? And it's like that's how you the audience feel. And I just feel like it encourages that scene encourages you to like just look at any random stranger on the street that way and be like, I wonder what shit they have going on, you know?
Yeah.
Because you never know, because
Yeah.
none of these guys look like strippers.
And I like that this scene is really the turning point in the plot where
Mhm.
they decide that they have to do this.
Yeah.
And to have it all be done relatively wordlessly in that scene, but just the decision to like go through with it.
Yeah.
They don't really sit down and have like a big conversation about him and Han back and forth. They're just like, yeah, so we're doing this. We're still doing this.
Yeah. Yeah. So I also like sprinkled in here. I don't remember exactly when it drops, but there is obviously the thing with the two ladies who come up to him and are like, "Hey, we heard you're gonna be stripping. Why should we come see you? Chippendales was just here last week. You know, we got the real thing." And Robert Carlyle makes the executive decision for everybody else.
Yes.
To be like, well, the reason our hook, our thing is we take our fucking whole dicks and balls out. Those Chippendales guys, they left the thongs on. You're gonna see everything.
You want to see this
Yeah.
this leathery, scaly scarecrow dick
Yeah.
swinging between Robert Carlyle's legs.
But I do love that those ladies, like, that works for them. They're like, oh yeah, that would be worth the price of admission. Like,
I think
let's see what you got going on.
I think just there's not a ton of things happening in Sheffield,
Right.
so it's like,
yeah,
might as well go down and see some dicks.
go see 6 dudes' dicks that you'd never seen before. Yeah.
Yeah.
But so then like all the other dudes get mad at Carlyle here, which is very funny. I like that Horse is like very this becomes once the full Monty thing gets dropped where it's like everybody's going to be seeing everything. Horse starts becoming the one who's very insecure about his penis size specifically. So that starts here, but I love him. I love Horse being like, my Willie, and then about like everybody's gonna see it, and then Lomper goes, your Willie, my Willie, like so petrified.
Yeah, the scene where they're all bonding by getting naked around each other.
Yes, in Gerald's house, which is very funny.
Yeah, it's very funny.
Yeah. And then the fucking repo men come in to take back the TV, and all these like dudes in their underwear come in and are like, "Hey, put that TV down."
Yeah, that's been my plan. If anyone ever breaks into my house,
Yeah.
is just get naked and scream at them. Like, what the fuck are they gonna do?
Yeah. If they have a gun, shoot you probably.
But I feel like if I was naked and screaming, they would at least think twice about it.
Yeah.
I also have an axe.
Oh, well, there you go.
My friends,
Now we're talking. Naked and screaming with an axe.
a few years ago, my friend's dad made me an axe, and
Your friend's dad made you an axe.
Yes, and how I found out was he was like, "Hey, so my dad had made you an axe.
Is he a blacksmith?
He found a piece of wood to make you an axe. No, it's not a great axe.
Okay.
But it is an axe, and I did use it to chop a little bit of wood that had fallen into like a tree limb that had fallen onto my yard, and I chopped it up so I could fit it into the dumpster.
Yeah.
I think that axe head's gonna fly off at any moment.
That's dangerous.
But I think if I was
I guess
naked,
that's what you get with a homemade axe.
yeah. I think if I was naked and screaming at an intruder and I embedded it into their collarbone, it would probably hurt.
Yeah, most likely.
It would probably deter them.
Yeah, naked and screaming and wielding a homemade axe, a DIY axe, is probably quite frightening.
Yeah.
I imagine. Yes. So they scare off the repo men from Gerald's house. They all bond by looking at their at each other naked. The other thing in the scenes at Gerald's house is there's the scene that I think is maybe a little bit later than the one where they're all seeing each other naked for the first time. Which again is like that is also very like sweet and charming when it's like, well, everybody else is gonna see it. Like, we have to be comfortable with each other first, right? But the scene that's a little bit later when they're all like using the tanning bed and using the exercise bike.
Yeah.
Is again one of my favorite scenes in the movie, because that's the one where they're going through the magazine and commenting on like the female model who's in the magazine, like just appraising her body, right? Like objectifying her. And then one of the guys is like, are they going to be talking about us that way? And it totally like breaks all of their brains, and they have to like reckon with the fact that they, as men, have been, as a matter of course, just objectifying women without the risk of that ever being turned back on them. And like now it is, right? Because it's like, yeah, you're going to be standing up on stage in front of a bunch of people naked. They will be objectifying you. And like that makes them all very uncomfortable, and they get all like very like, oh, I don't really like that, and like I hope they're nice about us in a way that we're not nice about the women that we talk about. And it's like it's a very good writing, and it's a very like the theme is very clear, and like it's very elegantly handled.
Yeah, I would agree. The thing that I mostly took away from this scene, though, is the joke when they're flipping through the magazine and Lomper's like, her tits are a little too big.
Tits too big.
And then Horse is like, I didn't realize that was a problem. Something to that
He said, I didn't think that was possible.
Didn't think that was possible. I did watch it right before I came over here.
Yeah.
But I'm also very tired.
That's fine.
And my memory's not as good as yours. But yeah, I thought that was funny.
Yes. It's a funny scene. And it's also funny to see dudes be like, oh no, I hope that people are nice when they're appraising my body.
Well, the other thing that I like about the scene when they're stripping naked and then the repo men come in and they stand up for Gerald's stuff is like, you never really doubt that these guys don't like love each other fiercely. Like
right.
this is a really strong group of friends.
Yeah.
And I think the movie does a good job of illustrating their dynamic and making you believe that these guys just like, you know, they've had conflicts with some of these other characters in the past, but like kind of like once you're in
yeah
their little circle.
Yeah, they're like really loyal to their friends. They're like ride or die. Like it's like
it's kind of a dude's rock.
It is
movie.
It's and like that's another dimension to this movie, right? Is like one of the antidotes to toxic masculinity is like positive male relationships, like male friendships, right? Like strong male friendships that are not founded on like a toxic foundation, right? Is one of the best things that you can do to counteract your own like internalized toxic masculinity, right? That we all have because we were socialized with it, right? And I think this movie is kind of saying that.
Yeah.
And anyway, so like I don't know, the other main things that happen here we've sort of already touched on, which is like Dave's body image stuff, right? His kind of performance issues in bed are hinted at.
Yeah, he even mentions something to the effect of like you know, if you're seeing someone else, I understand, or it seems like he feels like he's not good enough for her.
Yeah.
And therefore suspects her of like looking at other men or thinking about other options.
Right.
And kind of
that's one of the reasons that he wanted to know if she was at the Chippendale show.
Yeah.
Right, is because he's very paranoid. He's very insecure. So we're getting a lot of that stuff around here. And then also there's like a bit with this store that Gaz is always shoplifting shit from, or convincing Dave to shoplift shit from because Gaz has the face of a serial killer. But there's like a whole thing where, first of all, there's a guy who works there who juggles. And Dave's afraid that his wife is having an affair with this juggling clerk at this store.
because she's talking to him. Yeah.
Yes. But then also there's like a security guard position that opens up there. And like as the gig gets closer, Dave takes the security guard job and is basically like, no, I'm not going to do the stripping thing. Like I'll just work this like shitty hourly job and let my artistic dream die, basically. And Gaz is like, the fuck are you talking about? Like, you're an idiot. So that's like a little bit of like third act conflict.
Yeah, he takes the security job, and I think this movie does a good job of making you feel for both of these guys.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, it is like Dave is taking the safe route that's going to get him money for his family, but giving up, again, something that he's passionate about to do it. And it's like, a couple days before the show actually starts. And then this leads us into the dress rehearsal where Horse's niece,
his niece
shows up, and the other members of his family or whatever.
Yes.
And they start doing it, and then because they're doing it in the abandoned steel mill, which has been locked off, and there's security patrolling, a security guard catches them,
right?
And they all get arrested for indecent exposure.
Right.
Lomper and Guy book it.
Yes, they run from the cops wisely.
they run from the cops and steal some laundry and have a gay awakening.
Yeah, and their little run away from the cops caper thing is like very cute and sweet.
Yes.
It's like a very sweet little kind of entry point to their relationship. And also, I just wish there was way more of this relationship in the movie. Because it's like, this scene is so nice. And then, like, you basically get them then holding hands at Lomper's mom's funeral. And that's all you get of their relationship. And it would have been nice to get a little bit more. But, yeah.
But everyone else gets arrested and detained.
Yes.
And Child Protective Services comes into, or whatever the UK's equivalent, comes in to talk to Nath.
Yeah. And he's basically like, it was actually really chill. I was literally just stage managing. Like, he is just telling the cops, like, no, it's fine. Like, I don't care. And yeah, fucking Robert Carlyle gets dressed down by his ex-wife and Barry again here.
Fucking Barry.
Fucking Barry. But ultimately, like, they don't get like locked up or anything.
No.
And so the show sort of is gonna go on. But Gaz is also trying to talk like Dave back into rejoining them. Also, Lomper's mom dies, so then there's a funeral.
Well, it's a little up in the air if the show's going to continue.
Oh yeah, because it's like the show was going to be like the next day,
but
then they get arrested.
But they get arrested, and now the whole town knows,
right.
And it's like we see it's on the front cover of the paper.
That's right.
So like, there's a scene of Tom Wilkinson grabbing as many newspapers as he can from a corner shop and then throwing them in the trash.
Yes. And basically, there's like little scenes of each of these guys being recognized in the community. Like Horse goes to pick up his like government assistance check or whatever, and like the clerk is like asking him a bunch of questions, and she's like, have you been doing any work of any kind in the last 30 days or whatever? And he's like, no. And she's like, that's not what I heard.
But what changes it is Gaz hears from the venue owner that he sold 200 tickets for the show.
Right.
Which is, it's, again, like, I think it's funny that it's like this movie brings up these strange situations and it treats them as jokes for a little bit, but then the characters just like immediately embrace these things and take them seriously. So like the town discovering that these middle-aged guys are all stripping, it's like funny for a second, but then it's like, no, the town actually really wants to see the show.
Yes, yeah, because like the community is supporting them doing this, and part of it is like, yeah, like for a laugh or whatever, but it's like also like these guys are putting themselves out there, they're being vulnerable, and like people appreciate that. You know? So Gaz is basically like, oh shit, like if people bought tickets, we can actually make money on this. Like, let's fucking do it. And so then he's like trying to talk Dave into it. We find out Lomper's mom has died. So then the way that Gaz eventually kind of gets through to Dave is he comes in and he's like, hey, I need you to shoplift a jacket for me for this funeral because I can't afford one. And Dave comes back with 2 jackets, and he gives one to Robert Carlyle, and Gaz is like, oh, like, is your shift about to end? And he's like, nah. And they just like run out of the store and steal the jackets. I do also like the bit with the security alarm, with them stealing shit and running out of the store.
Yeah.
Especially the one where there's like the whole thing with the pick and mix, where Dave's always eating candy out of the like little fucking pick and mix thing. And he puts the candy in his mouth and the alarm goes off, and then he takes it out of his mouth and puts it on the floor and puts his shoe on top of it, and the alarm stops. Which is like very absurdist. It's like a very absurdist joke, but it really landed for me.
I like the first time when Dave steals the tape, there's a guy in the parking lot, gathering carts or whatever. And then when they steal the jackets, it's that same guy in the parking lot pushing like a bunch of carts all in a, all stacked together in a row right outside the front door, and Robert Carlyle just like flips over it, and this guy's just like, fucking same shit, different day.
Guy's just a fucking so over these dudes shit. You're like, all right. Yeah, so then they all go to Lomper's mother's funeral in support of him. This is when everybody else figures out that Lomper and Guy are in a relationship, and they're like chill about it, which I fucking love in this movie from 1997. Like, there's like a moment where Gaz and Dave are talking about it, and they're like, no, yeah, they're totally a thing. They're holding hands. And it does not change their behavior toward Lomper or Guy in any way. And I'm like, I love that movie from 1997.
Well, I love Lomper's band.
Yes.
Lomper's brass band, because he shows up to practice one day. This is his little clip for the montage of the town finding out about the stripping.
Yeah.
He starts playing and realizes that the band's playing something different, and it's like a big kind of sexy number.
Yes, the song is called The Stripper.
Yeah.
It's a jazz song called The Stripper.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then the band is at the funeral. And then at the end of the movie, the band is playing the music for the strip show.
Yes, which is fucking great. And yeah, and they also are there at his mother's funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And they play Abide With Me, which almost got me to cry. This was the time I almost cried.
Oh, okay.
Was Abide With Me at this funeral, just because you put on a fucking old hymn, and there is a decent chance that I will start crying.
Yeah, it's a really sweet scene.
Yeah.
I think I just wish I had more about Lomper's personality,
totally,
his relationship with his mother, his relationship with Guy.
Yeah.
To really make this scene hit home.
I agree.
But it's well done for what it is.
Yeah, I agree. And from there, it's like basically the show. Like that's the kind of last major thing that happens before we do the show. And so I feel like every dude except for Guy has had some moment where they've been the one panicking and being like, I can't do this, I can't do this.
Because Dave backs out last minute.
Right.
They're at the unemployment office deciding that they're gonna go through with it because they've sold tickets.
Yeah.
And Dave's on the computer, looking for jobs or preparing his resume or whatever.
Yeah.
And Dave says he's not going to do it.
Yeah.
Because of his body issues are really coming to the forefront at this point in the movie.
Yeah.
But after he has that conversation with his wife, we get the sense that he's gonna show up and save the day in the third act. But then right. Gaz starts having
Gaz starts freaking out, which I kind of love. I love that this was his idea. He's been the one who's been like pushing all of the rest of them to do this entire time. And like now they're all like cool as cucumbers. Like all the other dudes are like, yeah, we're gonna get out there and do this. Like they're all in their little costumes. And Gaz is like, no fucking way. And he does have a line about how he doesn't like that there are dudes in the audience, which seems like it might be homophobic at first. But then I feel like the context that's applied to it actually makes a ton of sense, which is he's like, I'm going to have to like go to the pub and talk to these guys, right? And they're all going to have seen my dick. So I feel like it's less like gross men will have seen my dick and more like this will enter an area of my social life that I'm uncomfortable with this activity touching.
Yeah, that's how I felt about it too.
Right. And so he's like totally panicking and not gonna do it. and they just start the show without him.
Mhm.
So they all start stripping to "You Can Leave Your Hat On" by Joe Cocker, and then his fucking kid gives him a pep talk. He's like, "Dad, you are gonna fucking go out there and you're gonna take your dick out in front of all those people," and it's like really touching. It's really touching.
And he takes a couple swigs of whiskey.
Yep.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
And the dance is great.
It's so good.
And what's great about it is there's a great line that Mark Addy shares with his wife in that scene where she finds out about the stripping. Because she finds the thong and she thinks that maybe he's seeing someone, and he's like, "No, I'm doing the stripping thing."
No, it's not a woman's thong. That's actually my thong.
Yeah,
that is my bright red leather thong.
he's like, "We weren't half bad," or something to that effect.
Yeah.
And when you watch the routine, he's right. Like, they're not half bad. They're not great.
No.
But they're good, and they have passion, and they're having a fun time with it, and that's what makes it so charming,
right,
and confident.
Yes,
and
yeah,
and
sexy, right?
And sexy.
Yeah, it's hot seeing these dudes be comfortable in their own skin, in their own bodies, in front of a crowd of people who are like cheering them on, right? Mm-hmm. That's what's sexy about it. Is it's like, yeah, no, it's nice to see someone be comfortable and happy just physically being themselves, right? And using what they have, right? Flaunting what they have,
yeah,
right? And not being ashamed of it and not trying to cover it up and hide it, right? And ultimately, like, I guess that's what stripping is, right? To some extent. And it's for the titillation of the audience, but I feel like to an equal extent, like that titillation just comes from like, wow, this person is like really being like bold and courageous and like putting themselves out there.
Yeah.
And so after the pep talk, Robert Carlyle joins them, and they go the full Monty.
Yeah,
and I like that it is like School of Rock, where every character is in the audience. Because in School of Rock, basically everyone that you've met, other than who isn't the band on stage, is watching them perform. The exact same thing happens in this movie, where it's like, yeah, like his ex-wife is there. Fucking Horse's niece is there. Gerald's wife is there.
Because nothing happens in Sheffield.
Right. Like everyone is there. Which on the one hand, it's like, oh, that's very sweet. All these people came out to support. And it's like, yeah, but also like that dude's niece is about to see his cock.
Yeah, for sure.
I do like the line that Barry didn't end up coming because Gaz's ex-wife told him that it was women only. Mm-hmm. Even though men are there. She was like, no, you can't come, it's women only. Which that means one of two things, right? Either she is not confident that her behavior at this show would be something that she wants Barry to see.
Sure.
Or Gaz's dick is not a thing that she is comfortable with him seeing. Which the implications of that is like, well, it's obviously just he's way bigger than Barry. Because if Barry comes to the show and sees that Gaz has him beat by a few inches, that man's never gonna recover.
That man's gonna be in his car sucking down some gas fumes.
Yeah. So I feel like it's either that, or she just is like, I want to have a good time with this, and I want to laugh with them and not at them. And if Barry was here, he'd expect me to laugh at them. Right.
But I love this ending. I think for this type of movie, it's as cathartic and enjoyable and a fun sequence to go out on and leave the movie on a high note, on the same level as something like the Battle of the Bands in School of Rock, or the fucking Bubble Bowl in the SpongeBob episode Band Geeks, which is the greatest moment of television history.
Yeah. It's like the final game in a fucking sports movie.
Yeah.
Right? It's like our heroes have triumphed. All of their training and the time they put into this and all of the toll it took on their personal lives has paid off. And now here's everybody applauding their success, and their success is standing naked in front of a crowd
Yeah.
of 400 people.
The movie ends on a freeze frame from the back.
From
we
behind.
we see all their butts.
Yes, the last bit of their choreo is they've been holding their police hats. They're in security guard uniforms. They've been holding their security guard hats over their dicks, and they just like toss the hats to the side. And so it's freeze frame after they toss the hats from behind. Yeah.
My question for you.
Yeah.
Would this movie have been better if we saw the dicks?
So
if we got a Boogie Nights ending?
So I thought about this a lot actually after watching this movie, where I was like, does the movie improve if we see the dicks? Because that is such a big part of the movie, is that they're going to show their dicks. And I don't know if I have like a strong preference one way or the other, but I see the argument for both sides, right? Because it's like, on the one hand, I'm like, show me them dicks. I want to see them dicks. And also it's like, it feels like it would
Gotta pull that clip out of the episode too, along with the
absolutely
the
You can drop me saying show me them dicks, I want to see them dicks out of context.
Show me them dicks.
Yes, please
show me them dicks.
Remix me saying show me them dicks, I want to see them dicks. But like, it feels like it would be a possibly more I don't want to say impactful, but like it feels like it would demonstrate the movie having more follow through. And this movie does have like an edge to it for sure, and I feel like that would be a little bit more in line with that kind of streak to this movie, the kind of like edgy transgressive streak, to be like, yeah, and also at the end we are just going to show you these guys dicks. Right? And I think I would have appreciated it on that level. I also kind of see the argument for not doing it, and I don't know why they didn't, if maybe some of these actors weren't comfortable doing it or what. But if the reason
or like
was
a ratings board issue thing, you know.
Right. But if regardless of the reason, I think them not showing it at the end also kind of works, because one, it's like it kind of leaves it up to your imagination, which is kind of fun, because it's like then the movie is like, we made you imagine what 6 dudes' dicks look like.
Yeah.
Right? And you're doing that voluntarily now because you were engaging with the movie on its terms. And also, like, I feel like it would almost maybe distract from the impact that the final number has if we ended on like cocks. Right?
Yeah, I think I'm a little conflicted too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the point is not to see the dicks, it's that they had the confidence to show their dicks.
Right.
And that has brought them all closer together.
Yes.
As men, and as has brought the town together.
Yes.
Which is the sentiment that the movie, I think, wants to leave you with.
Right. The point is that by being at literally as vulnerable as you can possibly be with a room full of people, they have sort of conquered their own toxic masculinity. Right? And so it's like you seeing the dick is sort of irrelevant to the movie making that point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the full Monty.
That's the full Monty.
Not the half Monty, not the 3/4 Monty.
Full Monty.
Full
Although
Monty.
Based on how worried about it he is, in Horse's case, it might be the 3/4 Monty. He seems quite concerned about the size of his penis. I like the bit where he has the penis enlarging thing and he's on the phone with the company.
Yeah.
And he's like, it's not working. It's not getting any fucking bigger. Yeah.
Yeah, don't trust the dick pills.
Yeah.
Don't trust the penis pumps.
They never work.
Um,
So David, is the full Monty the greatest movie ever made?
Justus.
Yeah.
I was very pleasantly surprised at how much I still enjoy this movie, returning to it after all these years and having very little memory of it. I think these characters are fun. I think these performances are really good. I love the themes that this movie is tackling, and I love how it balances the comedic elements with a lot of heart and a lot of drama. That it's an easy, light watch for sure. But we're still tapping into some stuff that I really connected with emotionally as well. I described this movie as quaint and charming. And to me, greatest movie ever made classic can be a lot of things, but I don't know if quaint and charming is maybe the first descriptors that should come out of my mouth for that kind of a movie. So had a ball with this and really enjoyed it. Just don't think it's the greatest movie ever made.
That's fair.
But an entirely enjoyable movie that is really just a nice. It's just I could see it being a comfort movie for people, even me, just like putting on the full Monty and having a nice afternoon with it. So I thought it was a great time, but not the greatest movie ever made.
Gotcha.
Justus.
Yes.
Is the Full Monty the greatest movie ever made?
David, I was also happy going back to this and seeing how well it held up for me, similarly to you. I think this movie is so fucking funny, first of all. I know we didn't call out a lot of the comic moments in this movie, because it's not really interesting to listen to people just repeat jokes from a movie on a podcast. But like one that I will call out that we glazed over is it is very, very fucking funny when it's revealed that Gerald gets erections watching nature documentaries.
Yeah.
It's just very funny. But yeah, so I think this movie is hilarious. I think it's full of like little one-off bits like that. And then just kind of like larger overarching comedic brilliance in the way that like the characters are constructed and the way that like the plot events unfold and stuff. I just think it's like a very masterful comedic work of writing, right? And I think we didn't really talk about it at all, but I also think it's like well shot, well edited, all of that stuff. Nothing like groundbreaking or amazing, but it's like quite nice to look at.
Yeah.
I think up and down the board, the performances are all great. And I do wish that, like we already talked about, some of the characters were a little bit more fleshed out, that we got more time to spend with some of these guys. And that maybe the movie was like just a tad longer, which again feels weird to say, but it's like in this case, I could have used it. But all that being said, I would rather have the movie leave me wanting more than it to be 2 hours long and for me to be like,
for it to be the judge.
Well, yeah. Yes. But even like a good movie that's a little too long, where you're like, that was good, but they could have lost a little bit, right? I will always prefer watching a 90-minute movie and being like, man, I wish there was more of that.
Yeah,
you know?
I would agree with that.
So that's not even that big of an issue for me. I had a great time with this, and I do think it's quaint and charming. But unlike you, I don't think that necessarily precludes it from being inducted into the hallowed halls of the greatest movie ever made. Which I do think this movie is. I think this movie is the greatest movie ever made because I like how it sets out clear themes. It explores them thoroughly. It interrogates them from a lot of different angles, and it's very thoughtful and very adept in how it handles those things. And also it keeps you entertained and laughing the entire time, and I really can't ask for more than that.
All right, so it is inducted into the Justus wing.
My hall, yes, specifically.
Of the hallowed halls of the greatest
yes.
movie ever made.
not the most hallowed hall, where the actual greatest movies ever made that we both agree on.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think one of the other things for me is you described this movie as very funny.
Yeah.
I think it's funny,
okay,
but I didn't find myself laughing at it a ton. I found myself more amused.
Gotcha. I was
anything
cackling,
else?
dog.
Yeah, okay. That's fair.
Yeah.
So that is The Full Monty from 1997.
Yes.
Directed by Peter Cattaneo. I might be saying that wrong.
And now, to end this episode, David and I are going to get naked in front of each other and look at each other's dicks. We're not actually going to do that.
Yeah. I did not consent to that when I started this podcast with you.
We're not going to do that. We're not gonna but it might bring us closer together as friends.
So it's Halloween again.
Yeah.
We're doing Halloween movies.
We're doing
Halloween Horathon 2. Dead by Dawn.
Dead by Dawn.
It's the sequel to the original Halloween Horror-thon.
Dead by Dawn. Dead by Dawn. Dead by Dawn.
We're talking about 4 movies. You're just getting those out before the Evil Dead 2 episode.
Oh, I'm going to be doing it on the Evil Dead 2 episode as well. Don't worry.
We're talking about 4 horror movies. We'll just hit you with them all now.
Yep.
The order might be different as far as how these episodes come out because we have some scheduling to work out with one of our guests. But we are going to be watching The Guest from 2014, directed by, I think it's 2014, directed by Adam Wingard, starring the great Dan Stevens and the great Micah Monroe, who have both been having a really, really good 2024.
Yeah, a movie you have seen and I have not, so that'll be interesting.
One that I would recommend going into as blind as possible.
Yeah, I know nothing about it.
Not saying it's like the Twist and Fight Club or anything, but discovering what the movie has in store for you along the way is one of the things that I enjoy about it.
Yeah.
We are also going to be joined by Tony Machete once again.
Our first ever returning guest.
Yes. He has decided that we're going to talk about Fred Decker's cult horror flick, The Monster Squad.
Yes.
Which I have seen before.
I have not.
So it'll be fun to go back to that and also talk to Tony as well, because he's just a joy and a treasure.
Yes.
And
probably one of our funniest episodes of all time was the one with him talking about Nobody Sleeps in the Woods Tonight, Part 2.
And also one of our least listened to?
Yes. Well, yeah.
But that's because of the movie. That's because no one's fucking heard of that movie.
But if you're listening to this and you haven't listened to that episode, I would encourage you to go listen to it. And also watch Nobody Sleeps in the Woods Tonight, too.
And Justus, what are the other 2 movies that we're talking about?
We will also be talking about, we already mentioned one of them, Evil Dead 2. So we're going to have our second Sam Raimi film on the pod.
Raimi's our first repeat director.
Yes, which I'm very happy about. And I, as an enormous Evil Dead fan, am fucking stoked to talk about Evil Dead 2. So it'll be fun to get into that. And then we're rounding out the month with a movie that I have seen and David has not, Rob Zombie's The Lords of Salem, which, just fucking... either watch the movie or just hold on to your fucking butts when that episode drops, because that movie's fucking nuts. And I'll save my thoughts on it for the episode, but what an interesting film from the man who created the fucking Firefly family and made like 3 from Hell and shit.
And wrote Dracula.
Yes, and also wrote Dracula. Dig through the ditches and burn through the witches, and slam with us in October with Halloween Horror-thon 2 Dead by Dawn.
Yes, we love you so much. I think we have a really great slate of movies coming up for you guys for Halloween, so we hope that you'll stick around for those, and tell your friends about the show, tell your mom about the show, tell the guys down at the unemployment office about the show, and maybe decide to start stripping together.
Yeah. Go to the strip club, tell the strippers about the show.
Yeah. We will see you next week, and as always, later dipshits.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Greatest Movie Ever Made. Please remember to leave us a rating and a review, and to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. We appreciate you supporting the show and spreading the word. Tell your friends to listen, tell your enemies to listen, tell your mom to listen. If your neighbor has an unsecured Bluetooth speaker, connect to it and play an episode. You can follow us on social media at TGMEM_podcast. And if you've got a movie that you want us to talk about, send us an email at thegreatestmoviepodcast@gmail.com.